All right, everyone, thank you for joining us for this pub-only call with Audigent, and they're going to be talking through curation, multi-publisher deals, and again, this has really kind of come out of the fact that we saw really a groundswell of conversations around this. While there's so many companies out there talking about curation, I think every publisher is wondering who's curating what and for whom, how do we know what we're getting out of this and so forth. And so to be completely frank with all of you, this was just something that I, having my own work with Audigent and some of the stuff that I do with golf.com, I knew that they have a play in this space. And I basically said, you know what, I think you should share how you're approaching this differently than what we're seeing others do. And they were open to do that. The fact that we're doing this on a Monday versus your normal Tuesday thing, that's on me just because I'm going to be gone for the rest of the week. And we really wanted to get to this because really at the end of this is an opportunity to get in early on things. Second part I'll say to that is this is all leading to some conversations we're going to have in Denver around multi-publisher deals and how, again, to sit there and think about curation and so forth. So with that in mind, Jake, Scott, I'm going to turn things over to you two gentlemen, and please start walking through things. And guys, queue up the questions as they come up.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Rob. And thanks, Scott, for joining me today. You've been an amazing duo in terms of leading the pub world and a lot of this and driving discussion around curation. I'm Jake Abraham, Chief Commercial Officer at Audigent. Scott?
I'm Scott Messer, Principal and Founder of Messer Media and Lead Ad Tech Therapist for adtechtherapy.com.
Maybe we're going to get into some therapy today, Scott?
Oh, yes, quite a bit. It'll be a little more educational, but we'll talk through your challenges.
All right, gents, dive in.
Nice to be here. Thanks for having me. Let's get started. Jake, I think you're going to run through some slides first, so you're up.
Yeah, I just thought it would be really helpful for us to like set the table here properly. As everybody knows, the open internet is not the entire portion of all spend here, and I love Chris Kane's slides, so I always love to give Jounce a little bit of love here and remind us all that there's a huge amount of spend going through all of the digital pipes, but what we're talking about here already is only 21% of the open internet because Google takes a big piece by themselves and Amazon's coming at us. So we're trying to talk about how do we maintain as much of that spend as we possibly can. From an Audigent perspective, something that we're always looking at is how much growth there has been in PMP. Certainly the vast majority, as you can see from eMarketer here, of spend still runs through direct, but just look at the last 6 years as PMP has massively overtaken Open Exchange. And in fact, now we see 66% of programmatic spend running through PMP, so 2-to-1 over Open Exchange. So that really sets the table for the discussion of what's going on. Why is this shift happening? And that's going to be part of the discussion today. I just jotted a couple notes down that, really what we're seeing here is that curators, both buy side and sell side curation, they're doing the work now through PMPs. So Open Exchange is moving away, and buyers are realizing they can do that because they have access to more data, and we're helping lead that charge. So when you can bring data from the supply side, that's audience data, that's contextual data, it allows for a lot more control. It allows for more scale and pre-qualifying of deals. We'll talk more about that. And the buy side being able to get a lot of transparency into what they're buying. So they're looking for attention metrics, viewability, brand safety, and many other things. We all know about addressability in the Open Exchange changing dramatically. That's led to a lot of growth in PMP. And finally, Scott, I know you've been big on this, which is SSPs really enabling curators to package. So there's a whole bunch of PMP activity happening, not directly from the pub side, but from the SSP side, leading to this whole new kind of demand.
That's right, Jake. And that's something I want
from here, you're going to dive in.
I am. Thank you very much. That's something that's really interesting I don't think publishers realize that 66% of like open web spend is PMP based. Because I don't think there's a lot of pubs on here who make 60%, 66% of their revenue from private marketplace deals, whether you include direct or not. So it got me to thinking a lot about like, how's this happening and what's happening and what does the internet look like, and priorities. So I did some work and I'm going to take us down memory lane here a little bit, um, into the demand source breakdown. When I look at a typical publisher stack, there's two big parts of it. There's unreserved demand, and then there is reserved demand. Reserved demand is direct, it's IOs, it's programmatic guaranteed, and unreserved is everything else that's available for RTB and various ways of transacting. In the typical stack, if you break that out, you see that it's like open auction demand, true OA and RTB, and then there's private auction demand. This is not to scale and it's representative for some general publishers, but this feels kind of what the world looks like. But I don't think everyone's really aware that SSPs have the ability to create PMPs for you. And this is what we see in the third line here. There is true OA RTB, which is really your SSPs and your seats just sending out requests. And then there's reserve demand and private auction demand. But in the middle, there's SSP managed deals. When we asked like what differentiates an SSP, they would say like we have unique demand or we do bundling and we offer our audiences. This is what an SSP is doing to help you drive yield. But you have to think of it, it's a yield layer above where you are. And so you're not actually managing all of this, which is something we'll talk about later. But it's important to understand that these platforms are trying to sell inventory for you. And with curation, there's a lot of focus on this SSP managed deals section. And that's the growth that we're seeing. That's exactly where curation is happening. So from a priority standpoint, right, we're very well, this is easy game stuff. There's sponsorship, there's standard, price priority, and house. Easy. When you break out price priority, there's AdX that runs at private auctions and preferred deals. There's AdSense that runs at price priority, and SSPs are all price priority, right? Those are your 10,000, 100,000 header bidding line items in penny increments. And if you're not doing penny increments, you should be doing them in penny increments. And then there's SSP priority and what the SSPs are doing. We'll come back to this. And there is an asterisk in there. I need to call it out because it's for private auctions, preferred deals, and Google shenanigans for how deals are structured inside AdX. I wonder if the DOJ wants this slide for an admission today.
Thanks for bringing us into that world, Scott. Appreciate that.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about curation in itself and what we're talking about in that managed service SSP layer. This is what I call deal curation as a service. It is sell-side curation where the inventory is being packaged and managed closer to the supply and the sell side, as opposed to inside of a DSP, just picking segments and random things and organizing the S&P 500 and driving demand through relationships and performance. KPI and outcome is a very important part of curation because brands are typically spending money directly with curation platforms. And so they're looking at, is this incremental to my regular campaign that might be running through a DSP, or how is this different than my performance budget? Curators and curation houses are very well equipped to optimize for KPIs, and they're better equipped to optimize than a publisher in any sort of PMP and campaign, because we all know the pain of getting performance metrics from a buyer as a publisher. They don't really give you any. They're like, hey, here's your CTR, but you're like, what's my ROAS? How did I do? When a buyer's working with Curation House, they're sharing those numbers because they're really trying to improve a campaign. A Curation House is something that sits in the middle. This is like our friends here at Audigent. Quite simply, they're the company doing the curation. They have a sales team that's out there selling to the market and driving demand through their deals. it's not just data sitting on a shelf hoping that somebody picks that segment, but they have buyers in market driving the deals. They do not own the media. So somebody who owns the media that's doing the curation is the publisher, but these are curators that sit in the middle. And typically you see a data backbone because they need a way to develop audiences, identify users across browsers and domains and sites so that they can spread their curation further across. And then there's a curation platform, which is typically an SSP, really just an SSP. They can bring data in. This is sort of tying in with the curation house's backbone. So in this case, Audigent will talk about how they load their audience data into these platforms and how they use their IDs to facilitate targeting across the platforms. And then they send out deal IDs to the buyers. This is a key component of curation where there's no data leakage and there's no carbon copy of data being sent out to the buy side, and you don't have a match rate problem, because what they're doing is they're creating deal IDs in the SSP and sending that to a DSP. So the important part is that's the data safe practice. And the most important part is that is a natural process for a buyer, and they're not reinventing the wheel. There's been too many solutions that try to reinvent the wheel and make it super hard, and you're trying to change their behavior, a buyer's behavior in the platform. But if you just say, here's a deal ID of what you need to buy, that makes sense to them and they can transact on it super easy. And of course, you can do an
Scott, I've
end-to-end
been
managed service.
here.
Yeah.
No, I was saying finish up. I was holding back.
Okay. Well, that's the foundation of curation.
I was just going to add,
we
I'm
can
going to maybe call us a meta curation layer at some point, but you know, we'll get into that.
You could be a meta curation layer. You guys, the Audigent hits on a bunch of these different elements where you're providing deal curation, you are a curation house, you're utilizing multiple curation platforms. And a publisher can both use you as a curator and they can use you as a curation platform through your simple PMPs. There's some great tools. I think we're going to talk about them later, Jake.
I mean, your call.
We will. Right. So I'll briefly go through this. The reason why you want to do curation is not to replace everything that you have on the sales side, but it's a really good way to augment what you're doing from the sales side. And to, if you're not licensing your data, it provides you a path into that. It gives you an easy way to do audience extension if you want to do that. And it drives you incremental unique demand, which we all know is the key to a healthy open auction and pushing pressure on it. So I highly recommend adding curators into your platform, and Audigent as one of those. And then some questions to ask of curation houses, which we might ask Jake today, is, do I need a contractual relationship with you to get this demand? If do you have code on my page, and what are you doing with my data? How can I earn money beyond my O&O? And then, do you have guaranteed demand for your campaigns? So we'll bring those up as we go through and talk to Jake. How are we doing?
Yeah, how are we doing?
I'm feeling
I
pretty
think you're
good.
doing fine. Already got some compliments on the slides. One, I put in a couple of questions here, but I'll ask them now, which is, if PMPs are 66%, do you know whether the mechanics around traffic shaping, bid shading, and all that kind of stuff, are PMP deals like this more likely to get passed through to the DSP than others? Is that a factor in that, or are those two unrelated subjects? You understand kind of why I'm correlating those two?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they are correlated. I think what we've seen, and Jake's been helpful in showing me this, is that open auction demand isn't passed at 100% between the SSP and the DSP. We know that SSPs are throttling the requests that they're sending out, and the DSPs are filtering out the requests that they're getting. So there's a double filtration layer. Typically, those algorithms work to provide liquidity in the market and for high-priced CPMs. So they're going to filter out anything where they don't suspect that a impression will be purchased or sold or bought. And that usually means cookies and identifiers. So there's a tremendous amount of throttling going on across the ecosystem, especially if you're in UAM or and have some intermediary services in your SSPs. That means that you're not sending all of your inventory to these platforms. And so curation, though, opens this up because when you're working with curators and they're doing deals at the SSP level, that means that the SSP can whitelist that PMP to send 100% of the impressions in that deal. And then a DSP
Also remember,
should be looking to get it. Go ahead.
continue.
No, that's what I got.
Sorry, I'm stepping on you there. I was going to say, just like from our perspective and all the curators out there, we've got some other opportunities here to have an impact on that auction, because we're already telling the SSP where the buyer is and what that DSP seed is, and we've already given the buyer bidding guidance based on what the floors are that the publishers are setting. So we're kind of putting a lot of work into the routing to begin with. So we're building the deal, we're scaling the deal. We know what publishers are eligible for the deal. We know what audiences or contextual data is going into that deal. We're packaging the deal and sitting it in the DSP. So in terms of what the SSP needs to do, we're giving them a lot of opportunity to understand why this deal should be prioritized, because there's a buyer, sitting there waiting and understands the bidding guidance to win those bids.
So just one point I want to make, and then I want to go to Lila's question, and then let's continue on. Oh, and I saw Kimmy, you had something. If you could actually put that in the chat, and then we'll call and pull on you. But what that tells me, though, is if the curated signal is a better signal, it tells me the deprecation of the open signal that's not curated is probably, again, either not getting passed through, which means you're getting a lower CPM. So I feel like as time goes by, the curated deals are going to wind up, again, having much more value, and CPMs on non-curated is actually going to go down because it's not even getting really bid on and getting the minimal amount of love and attention. So again, it's just, another reason to kind of look at that. Lila's question really was about that 66%, was that based on revenue? Do you want to go back to that slide if you want to speak to that?
Yeah, I saw that quotient. That's absolutely right, by the way. Yes, Lila, that is correct. And if you go back, if you look at that eMarketer stat, that is directly tied to revenue. So as you can see, Open Exchange, I don't know how many impressions are running through it, but you can see revenue kind of went up for a couple of years in mid-COVID and kind of has settled back down around, around 50 billion. And now you're looking at a PMP market that's, combined with Open Exchange over 150, but that's like about 100 billion of PMP spend versus 50 of Open Exchange.
Okay. All right, let's keep going. And again, add up the questions, guys.
Jake, I think this is a great point to sort of talk about what Audigent's been doing in the marketplace. How can a publisher tap into Audigent demand?
So as probably a lot of pubs here on this call know, SSPs have probably already opted you into many of their curation programs, depending on who those SSPs are. Some have done opt-in, some have done opt-out. You've probably received paperwork around that. That's probably now, 2 to 3 years old at this point, when there was a lot of frenzy around like opting publishers into curation platforms. So you're probably seeing some of that spend already. From our perspective, and I don't know how other curators are working, but from how we see it, part of our program really relies on our ID as well, the Hadron ID. So I really wanted to emphasize today how important that is, because you may be opted in at the SSP level, but the way we're building our deals and the way our buyers are looking to buy, it's really important to deploy our ID as well. And we can get into like what our ID does and how it operates. But ultimately, it's super different because, again, it's not like we're using buyers in the DSP to buy on our signals. We're using RID as a mechanism to recognize audiences and package for our deals. So deploying RID, super important, and that makes you eligible for a vast majority of our spend, which will be 140 million plus this year, and allows you to hopefully future-proof revenue. I mean, we see this as not a short-term trend, but a long-term trend. Rob, responding to what you were saying, and part of the problem with the open auction is that data needs to be delivered into a DSP. And in terms of privacy and data leakage, Scott, you spoke to it as well. We'd much rather have data living inside our system and just being sent as a proxy through a deal ID and not actually shipping data across other platforms. So we think it's the way of the future for sure. And, I just put a little note in here saying, make sure you're talking to folks that actually lean into sales. I mean, that's a huge part of what we're doing, is talking to brands and agencies, because our success is not just around, throwing deal IDs out into the ecosystem, which has pretty limited success, but actually being at the table with our advertisers in deeper and deeper ways to show them the value of these publishers, whether it's through their data or through their inventory or both, so that we can drive more demand into the ecosystem.
Great, thank you. And Ryan, we're going to get to your question. Just hang on to that for a second. Jake, let's take a look at what is the Audigent footprint, and from a data standpoint. I'll take this one for you. Audigent is the #2 global audience provider in the world. This is the proliferation of the Hadron ID and where they are sending data to advertisers. This is Sincera data. So they're big, they have a large footprint, they're easy to work with. But when it comes to your audiences, because we wanted to talk about, well, what do you have to help curate deals, right? So what is this? What's on this slide?
Yeah, so I mean, from interestingly, our earliest days, we were really kind of an alternative to the DMP. We thought, geez, this is a real opportunity for us. DMPs didn't necessarily have the best value prop for publishers, so we started out by being an alternative to the DMP and had a lot of success doing that. So you'll still see on the left side there, we have DMP customers like Warner Music Group and Fandom and Slick Deals, across many parts of the internet. Now we have pure play DMP customers, but more and more, as we wanted to bring other data providers into our ecosystem, there was an opportunity to say, wait a second, we can not just monetize data for the TransUnions and Axioms of the world. We can actually plug this third-party data into our curation platform and allow both publishers and advertisers and DSPs to come in, mix and match publisher first party with data provider third party, build deals, and ship to the ecosystem. So for us, having these other data providers in our platform allows us to just drive so much more scale and potentially specificity. As we know, publishers have great contextual alignment through their content, but sometimes there's that need from an advertiser perspective, or however you may need reach, to kind of look at some other data sources as well.
And once you package these deals, where are they going? What's happening here?
Yeah. So, it started small and it got larger over time. We've seen some other attempts to really lock in on one SSP and try to go exclusive. And we just knew, for a variety of reasons, that would never be our approach. Some of the folks on here were very early to this game. Obviously, Xandr Curate was a very early player. And then you have some like Index Exchange that really just launched their curation platform in the last 6 months to 12 months. So for us, we wanted to be SSP agnostic. As we know, there are agencies and advertisers that have SPO deals that are specific to certain platforms. So we wanted to make sure that we could process spend from anybody who had those specialized relationships. And then on the other side, we wanted to make sure that we had all the best data we could bring. So this is really about making sure that however a publisher or an advertiser wants to execute across SSPs, we have the answer for both the data and the supply.
It's really fascinating. It's neat how this footprint spreads out And you can really see how a curator is doing this is going to maybe controversial. A curator is doing the job of a publisher that a publisher wasn't able to accomplish on their own. And that's like around seller defined audiences and data licensing and PMP packaging. The only ones who could really sell data and package PMPs really well was a very few select publishers. And they had real data and they had real audiences and real traffic and real scarcity of their markets to be able to package in a really meaningful way. I think most pubs have sort of relegated themselves to supply level PMPs or one or two strategic ones. But I think we all knew that the PMP as it stood before was under threat going back as far as like 2016, 2018. I like to say that my life's work is answering the question, why shouldn't we just buy you in the open auction? And trying to solve that for publishers. And frankly, having a curator that can package all this data up and make it available across platforms and is much more entrenched and embedded with the buyer teams through your own sales team makes it a lot easier for a publisher to say, you can, but there's a curator out there representing me and making sure that more of my inventory is being sold on a preferred basis.
Yeah, look, Scott,
Jacob,
that's an amazing point. And I would add that, we'll get even into more of that as our products have matured, because we really see the ability to speak to advertisers. I don't want to say on behalf of the publisher, because we don't represent publisher inventory, but we really do want to become more and more of a translation layer. As you said, it's been so hard. I mean, seller defined audiences is a great example. Obviously, those have been really, really tough in many ways, but all of Audigent's business for the last, 5 years has been about activating audiences and driving revenue for those audiences back to publishers. So we do, to some degree, become a connective tissue or a translation layer for data at scale when a publisher can't either scale it themselves or they just struggle to have that trusted relationship with the advertiser. I think it's really unfair. I think the publisher needs more of a voice at the table, but we've just tried to do our best to say, how can we aggregate and bring other insights to make this data valuable?
that's a really good point, Jake. Let's take a look at what simple PMPs are, and then we'll get to some of the questions in the chat.
Yeah, great. So I just thought it was worth mentioning that, because of the amount of interest that there's been in curation, we realized that we needed to have like what we call our meta curation platform, or our meta curation layer. So we built something called Simple PMP. It contains all of our first and third party data for all pubs that have opted in, and for all of our data providers. And it's just simply a tool to take interesting data. We list all of the data scale across all of our segments with some explanations. And you can go in and mix and match and build custom segments, and then go and curate them across the SSPs where you do business and push them into DSP seats. So our goal was to say, yes, could you go into Xandr, curate, integrate your data, make that a curation platform for you, and index, and all of PubMatic and OpenX and all of them. Yes, that opportunity exists. We thought maybe we could be a one-stop shop and say, we've already built the pipes. Those are all custom integrations, very specific specs that we've built with those SSPs to enable our optimization layer and all of the things that we do to scale and spend and optimize deals. So why not build a platform where anyone can come in? I mean, this is what our strategy teams use to build deals, but also it allows publishers to come in, advertisers, even DSPs now, where we marketplace deals and we build entire marketplaces for DSPs. They go into this tool, build their deals, and ship them to their seats.
It's really fascinating. So this is kind of like what a buyer would see when they come into your platform, or a publisher could log into this and do audience extension through it. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, that's absolutely correct. It's probably the most exciting part of my job now, is seeing publisher adoption and starting to have pubs understand and see opportunity, whether that's specifically because they don't have CTV inventory and they see a way to potentially add a CTV deal to a line item and try to get some incremental revenue, or tons of hybrid agency publishers we work with where they've got a certain number of domains, but you know what? They've got such specialized audiences that sometimes those domains sell out and they need to get additional inventory. This becomes a tool for pubs to work in many different ways to drive revenue. And it's probably been the most satisfying thing for me to see us have publishers start to like onboard, drive revenue, and find new channels for opportunity.
And that's the plan for me at golf.com, right? Which is to take our first party data and look to be able to target them in places like CTV, because we do not have a CTV solution. So that just again opens up new inventory, as well as just being able to connect up to some of these other data sources and again get kind of that audience extension piece of it going on. So that's in our roadmap.
Rob, that's exactly right. And remember, sorry to step on you there. I would just say like real quick that like golf's a really interesting example because the audience is small, but it's mighty, right? It's a high net worth. It's a very desired audience. It's obviously particularly male, and it's very specific in the kinds of brands that you guys speak to. So your ability to come in here, find your first party audience, but also knowing that you may need to supplement that with some third party because you may not have enough audience to speak to some of your biggest advertisers. This is a way to say, great, I'm gonna bring as much first party as I can, but see where I over-index. Maybe I need to pepper it with some household income segmentation that kind of boosts me a little bit there. Or maybe I pepper it with some enthusiast data around other sports, and try to build that and see if you can launch that deal to your advertiser and then rely on Audigent to make it perform on the back end.
Let's make data peppering a term. Can we do that? I like that. I like that peppering.
Yeah.
Is it related to like salting?
Yeah, salting already means something, so peppering's got to be
data
something
spicing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Let's. I think we're at that question part.
Yeah. Let's get into some questions here. Let's go up and
Matthew,
take.
you have your hand up. Do you have? Did you have a question, or did you mistakenly put your hand up as well? If you want to just sit in the chat or whatever, we can throw you in. I will go on. Matthew, let us know. Go ahead, Scott. Look like you
have the ability to talk.
So what we'll do is once we get done with the next set, we're gonna add people up to sit there and have the conversation.
So Ryan, for your question, what if a publisher with a large sales team with deep brand and agency sales success? Great question. Like, I still think curation is a part of your strategy. You also don't realize how much of your inventory is already being curated for you. As I've been doing my curation exploration, I've run into a dozen companies that say they're doing curation, and I ask if they have a relationship with the publisher, and the answer is no. They use Xandr Curate, Index marketplaces, and OpenX, and a variety of other platforms to arrange and assemble data and packages and sell them just in the same way Audigent is doing. It's unique that you can partner with Audigent to do this to other curators. But I would say you're not doing this on a publisher specific basis. You're not doing branded data licensing. And so having a curator out there representing your market, your inventory, isn't really a sales conflict. But if you think that it is, then that's a trade-off you're going to have to balance. But I think for most of the pubs who don't have sales teams and don't have large, successful brand agency experiences, this is going to be a welcome boost in firepower.
And I would just add, Scott, because man, I deal with that question all the time, and I'm very sensitive to it because every publisher is different. There's publishers with really strong sales-led orgs where the sales intelligence is the most important thing, and we don't always have as much success with those guys. But I do just want to remind everyone, we are really selling an audience-first approach. So I'm selling audiences more than I'm selling inventory. We don't represent any publisher inventory. So we're never going out in market saying, hey, we've got Condé Nast inventory that you've got access to. I mean, even golf.com, like Rob, I would never say I'm out representing golf inventory. I would say, oh, we have audiences that are golf enthusiasts, and we could talk about that. And if Rob says, oh, I want to actually say it's specifically golf.com audiences because that's valuable to what I'm pitching, we can have that conversation. But we're very sensitive to like channel conflict. So we've always been an audience first approach. So I'm interested in selling audience first and then curating inventory through an SSP that relates to that, whether that's because it's certain channels or we can talk about certain priorities in some of our newer products. But I'm interested in audience. And that's the way we avoid the conflict that some folks may be talking about. Like, how do I go back to my sales team and say, wait, someone else is out selling on our behalf?
Let's go to Brendan's question, who obviously has a kind of opinion about, a little concern about the curation thing, not moving PMPs away from being a one brand to one pub type of thing. My only comment, again, guys, just weigh in on this if you have a sec, but like, I think the one part to this, right, isn't that publishers went to the SSPs and said, hey, could you start doing this? The SSPs started bundling these PMP. Like, in other words, this has been happening.
We asked for more money, and their solution was to come back and do multi pub deals. And Brendan, I think your question is really asking, like, are SSP curated PMPs really PMPs? And the answer is yes, because they're sending out a deal ID, and they're effectively a private marketplace in an open exchange. There is a big distinction of who created it, where does it come from, how does it sit inside your stack. There was a partner missing from their supply relationships, and it was a big one, and it's AdX. AdX currently does not openly offer curation services or is a curation platform that can be used. So all of this is happening through the other SSPs. Yeah. But it is a PMP, effectively. When you ask the buyers how they're spending their money, they don't really differentiate whether it's a Audigent PMP or a publisher-specific deal ID. They're just deals.
Yeah, and Brendan, I would say I hear you. I see that question and I understand it. Or I see that comment. I think that it might help over time. I mean, this is not an industry that's done very well with standardizing terminology, and we got a lot of acronyms. So, you know, if we land on something that makes more sense here, like we're all for it. I'm certainly not wedded to it, but I think that the goal here, as Scott was saying, is to make it clear that we're not just throwing things out to the open market. We are trying to find very specific buyers or marketplaces where we're putting these deals. So they do transact as a deal ID. They are a private marketplace. They're not open to everyone in the open auction.
All right, let's move on because I want to be a little concerned with time.
Yeah.
There's some really good stuff here, and I want to get to some of the new development. So go ahead.
Yeah, let's take Brendan's. I'm sorry, not Brendan's.
Ryan Postal, what about that in terms of the ballpark breakout? Your data partners, can you give a take on that, Jake? I don't know if you see it. Do you have a ballpark breakout of your data partners on third party versus first party data? Curious for how opting out of cookies on Chrome will impact your data integrations.
Awesome, great questions. Ballpark of breakout of data partners. Well, so I mean, depends on how we define the ballpark. Are we talking about like a data scale, number of partners? I mean, we could kind of get into the weeds there, but I would just say that
is cookie deprecation going to hurt your business?
Got it. Well, certainly cookie deprecation is something we pay particular attention to. I don't know if anyone follows how involved Audigent's been in Privacy Sandbox, and particularly the POPI, Protected Audience API. We are the largest aggregator of interest groups in protected audiences. We currently, I think, represent 40% of the entire market. At one point, we were 70%. So yeah, we're very much paying attention to what's going to happen in Chrome. The good news is, because we are sell-side activation and not buy-side, we are totally willing to activate in cookie-challenged environments because we've moved to real-time data integrations with our SSPs. Maybe that's another webinar, Rob, for another day. But what we've done to future-proof this business is not have business that was relying on third-party cookies. So we've done real-time data integrations, which means we co-locate servers with SSPs. Allows us to see what's coming in from the bid stream, see what has a Hadron ID that is not cookie dependent. and then we can make a decision about what deals to respond to in real time and pass that downstream. So that's just a long way of saying everyone's going to be impacted by cookies. We're already future-proofing our business, and therefore hopefully the businesses of our data partners and our inventory partners and our SSPs, by saying we're not relying on a third-party cookie to make any decision.
Because I want to make sure that you get this next couple of slides done, why don't we go there? And then there are more questions. And in fact, what we'll do is we'll pull some people up to be part of these conversations so that we can get a true dialogue kind of going on. And
absolutely. And I want to make sure to get to Emery's too. Emery, that was a partial answer to your question, but we can get into it deeper too.
Yeah. All right. So let's bring it home on the slides.
Great. So take it all the way home. This product has been very successful. Obviously, curation has had a really great few years, and there's a ton of other curators coming into the space, and we're happy to see the growth and the maturity. What we're also seeing is from our buyers a desire for more, and more means they like the win rates, they like the pricing, they like the performance, but they want to get more. And it's been tough to get more because often more just means bid more. And we wanted to offer some more premium products in the space. And when we looked at what's been done, quite honestly, there hasn't been a lot of innovation in programmatic. We have a slide here of kind of when preferred and guaranteed came to market. And so what we've been working on just this quarter and we'll be announcing pretty soon is something that we're calling programmatic premium or preferred deals, because there's direct business, obviously, and there's PG business, but there's nothing that really sits underneath that can give more priority, allow publishers to deliver premium inventory into the marketplace, and have our buyers pay more and have access to more premium products. So we were looking for something to be more premium, more data-driven, and so we're kind of coining a phrase right now that we call PPDs, premium priority deals, which is going to allow buyers to have access to more of your premium inventory, depending on how you guys define that. Allow us to still deliver the data that these advertisers want, whether it's their own first-party data, whether it's publisher first-party, whether it's data provider third-party, and then to continue to bring scale and continue to bring efficiency. So all of the optimization that Audigent has brought to the table, but with more premium inventory from you guys.
More? Do you want to talk about this or just show that?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say in a minute or two, there's a lot of components to what we've built into this to give a PPD some premium nature over a typical PMP deal. So it's different from PG in that it's not booked revenue. It's not guaranteed in the same way, but it has many more of the bells and whistles of a guaranteed deal than just a typical PMP. So we're going to be able to add all kinds of components to it that is more typical of what a buyer sees from a direct deal or a PG deal. And we're excited with some of these early partners, and we're looking for publishers that want to get involved.
Of which, Jake, if you are a publisher and you want to get involved, how can they get involved?
Yeah, so we are charging ahead to try to get some testing done even this month so that this is really live in Q4. We're just looking for publishers that have some inventory that may be available. That premium is a term that we're all going to define together. Meaning maybe you've got some higher viewability inventory or some ad slots that you love that don't seem to get bought because they're for whatever reason in the bid stream they're not seen in the same way. But basically, just reach out to us. It involves getting set up with a few of our SSPs in a different way. There's literally zero cost. We're just looking right now for publishers that have the bandwidth to do a little bit of testing, get set up with their SSPs, and then we're going to start bundling these PPDs in the same way that we do our PMPs today. Just the ability to bring more visibility, bring more premium nature to our buyers, and see if we can't get, to your point, Scott, earlier, publishers really seen again as the opportunity to buy from across the types of inventory they have, and try to help move some more premium inventory that isn't getting sold through direct and PG.
I appreciate that. Thanks, Jake. Rob, that
Yeah, why don't we take the slide down if you don't mind, and then let's go into the questions. I want to get. I'm trying to keep it somewhat in order, though that'll mean we'll bounce around a little bit. But I know I'd mentioned the CTV piece, and Jeff McPherson asked, assuming you're using full IP to map web-based data sets to CTV, so a little bit more into that question, and then others. I'm going to start to add you to the
Yeah,
conversation.
that's generally correct. I mean, IP address continues to be a really good way to do that. There are other ways as well, but generally speaking, yes, mapping IP address, building deals in that way, and taking those web audiences and making them addressable in CTV.
Jake, Scott, thanks for collecting your thoughts and putting that together in a coherent pattern. So that was good to be able to see that and learn from that. And thanks everyone for joining and asking such great questions. I think that there's more to be discussed on this and to watch on this. And again, Audigent has their alpha testing. So if this is something of interest to you, by all means, get in contact. Other than that, go on with your day and thank you all.